I measure the progress of a community by the degree of progress women have achieved in a society. This is rightly quoted by Mr. B.R. Ambedkar, the man behind the Constitution of India, or I would say the greatest constitution that the world has ever seen. So this video is a retrospective inspection of all the incidents that have happened in India and up until the Manipur incident, the Manipur violence that shook the nation. It not just violated few women but also violated all the humans that we ever come across in our nation. The miscreants were behind the deed, not just snatched the modesty of those women but also the modesty of each and every one of us in this nation. So why we are shocked, but yet this is what expected of our nation. This is not the first time that we encounter such a horrific incident that I've encountered to a woman. Even after gaining 75 years of independence to this nation, we are still at the threshold of not able to protect the woman, the dignity and the rights conferred on them. So in this video, we are going to trace all forms of atrocities and more importantly, the reasons, the cause and effect behind all forms of atrocities that ever happened to women. So let's trace back and go back to the time when Homo erectus, or at least Homo pedestals, when they started to form a sort of a society or a community in the place. It is observed from the archaeological evidences that humans generally went about in a community or in a group of people. They necessarily shouldn't be kin and kith or relatives, but they usually moved in groups or in community. The reason is for safety, of course, but there are other reasons why they always prefer to move in groups or in community. And that was gender-based roles were assigned to certain categories. Women were in charge of children and the well-being of them, while men went out and hunted animals for them. It's not that women were underprivileged and men were overprivileged. There were no such concept over there. When people started to understand the concept of safety and sound and equal distribution of work, women preferred to be stayed back at home because of pregnancy and childbirth. And since male had the biological advantage, or I should say the strength and the sturdiness that they possessed, it's for that reason why they were the ones in charge of hunting. More or less, no other tasks were compared less to the other. Now let us fast forward and get back to the Indus Valley civilization, when the first form of formal civilization ever happened in India. That was the time when egalitarian society, or I should say the most forms of seeing everyone equally, no forms of discriminations were ever recorded, where each man were bringing out their contribution onto the table. One could be an artisan, the other could be a pottery maker, the other could be a trader, the other could be an agriculturist, the other could be a fisherman. So there was no forms of segregation, but yes, there was an extent of discrimination prevalent. That is, it was considered a matrilineal forms of society where women were given much higher strata compared to the men. It was all going on up until the Indus Valley civilization itself disintegrated and declined. No one knows the reason for the sure, but yet it disintegrated and the people of the Indus Valley civilization migrated to the eastern and southern part of the nation. And then comes the most popular Vedic society, or I should say the coming in of the Aryans. It was not in any kinds of invasions by the Aryans, but they were just considered to be an immigrants by the archaeologists. They just came in waves in different categories and different timelines as well. They came over here, settled, they assimilated their culture, overthrew the culture, and more importantly, codified a certain system and language, and more importantly, the greatest religion that we can ever find in India. All were great and rosy up until the 1000 BC. That was when the Rigvedic age, or I would say the early Vedic age, was settling down in our nation. The discovery of iron started in 1000 BC. And with the discovery of iron, it started the aggressive aggrandization and more importantly, conquering lands and conquering nations on the name of Mahajanapadas or Janapadas. Up until then, there were no concept of physical property as such. All they were given importance was family, love, kith and kin. But once iron was discovered, it was much easier for the inhabitants, let it be Aryans or non-Aryans, it was easier for them to conquer the lands, to make weapons and tools out of it. And that's how they started to get rich and commercialize these forms of products. And what is the most easiest way for someone or someone in power to extend your control, to extend your power and to enlarge your territory? And it is through women. And that is what time and again the history has proved and shown it to us. They would send their daughters married off to other communities or to other Mahajanapadas, thereby securing a form of alliance with the other Mahajanapadas as well, and thereby securing good forms of property on the names of dowry. We do know that the kings and the affluent men of past had many wives. One of the reasons behind that was this. Each wives of these great people in the past would bring in dowry in large sum, and that will enable them to help in the campaign process, to enlarge, to extend their territories. And just how we all evolve and adapt to the environment and the surroundings around us, women were expected by the society and their own family to evolve to be the most suppressed, the most obedient, so that they can facilitate the functioning of the others. Women as a power were highly reflected in the epics and the mythological literature that we can find even today. That is, in Mahabharata, it's pretty much evident that Draupadi, she was a daughter of a great king Draupad. But in spite of all that, she was expected to wed the 5 brothers, just so that the conflict among 5 brothers could be avoided. There were no forms of consent, there were no rooms of consent over here when Draupadi was forcefully wedded to the other 5 brothers. However, the trauma endured by Draupadi for being shared by the 5 brothers were not recorded in any forms of literature, but her trauma when she was disrobed in front of the Kuru elders, the Pandavas and the Kauravas, were clearly evident and spoken out. When her husbands lost themselves in the game of ties, she was kept as a pawn without even asking her permission. Draupadi, in spite of having a name of her own, she was called to be Panchali, the woman who was wedded to 5 men. She was stamped and called names on the basis of decisions made by the others on her. And this is a sad story that's happening in India, and not just in history or mythology, but in relevant past as well.
The cousins say that it would have been better had they died that day than living a life like this with this trauma throughout their life.
Why do men feel that they are entitled to disrobe and disregard the modesty of women? When Manu codified the laws of land, he wrote the laws and the rules that should be followed for his own advantage, how that would benefit him. If I am someone who making an effort to write down the codified laws and regulations, I would make sure that I would benefit some way or the other. There is a form of integrity that has to be questioned on the forms of the character's author. Like the Ambedkar's quote that I said in the beginning of the video, he was the one who was kept in charge of drafting our constitution. The person of that integrity, the person of that attitude, that perseverance and perspective was given the greatest responsibility to codifying the law of our greatest nation. When any forms of historical ill-treatment that we look into consideration, let it be Jauhar, Sadi, female infanticides, all in the name of honor or the name of religion or societal norms. And this is because she is considered to be a physical property of a man, either of a husband, a father or sons. Kanyadan or dowry as a concept came in because women had no forms of inheritance in the past. And let's take the greatest societal institution of our nation, that is family, or should I say marriage, to be more specific. Marriage as an institution of society has come in just only for the advantage of men, where a woman at the tender age, where she is supposed to make an identity for herself, where she is yet to explore herself, she is being married off, she is plucked from the bud and being married off to a different scenario where she is supposed to serve them. This is a form of an unpaid maid where she is entrusted with the whole responsibility of the house, but yet she cannot call it her home. She's still a stranger, she still has to ask for permissions, she still needs an authoritative grant to make decisions on herself, her children and for the family's betterment. And when I talk about the other forms of active forms of violence against women, and that includes rape, murders, dowry death, forced prostitution, forced child marriage, acid throwing, abduction, perpetuation, witchcraft related murders, honor killings, and more importantly, psychological aggression a woman has to endure in her own personal space and personal front. A home where she's supposed to be the most protected, the most safest place a person can ever be, she is being violated. And women are conditioned in a way by the society, family, and the nation that they feel that whatever they're enduring, it's justified. And this is a personal cry from myself, is that do not be kind, do not be soft hearted, do not be empathetic, do not be compassionate in a way that your compassion, your goodness will bring out the bad in others. Yes, you heard it right. When women as a category, when they are being more submissive, when they be more kind hearted, when they are letting it go all the bygones, you are actually paving the way for these men and the others to be more atrocious than they already are. If I'm enduring all these pain, if I'm being the victim of any forms of domestic abuse, any forms of violence or atrocities that a woman had to endure, I'm actually setting a bar or a standard for my daughter also to endure for that. My sisters and the coming generations also has to endure because of me and my fault. And the biggest reason why women are not being assertive enough is because of the financial constraints and societal impositions that we're putting on them as well. When they are being married off at such a young age, they don't have the chance, they don't have the experience, the opportunity to know themselves, discover their potentials, to bring out a monetary gain to themselves. And once you're being uprooted from one system to the other, you don't have the financial backing. What if this fails? You don't have a background, you don't have something else to cling on. And that is the greatest fault in a society, that we are not financially independent enough. We should see ourselves to be human resources. For example, if I would take into consideration, this remote was created, was produced by different factor inputs and not just by laborers, by forms of resources, in forms of monetary, in forms of machinery, in forms of effort and hard work. So all forms of factors of input caught into making this remote a possibility. And that is how we as humans have been made. When I grew up, I am being nurtured by my parents. I am being sent off to school where I get basic educations. I am being sent off to colleges and higher educations where I am being enriched to be the greatest human resources that I could ever be. And what happens when I don't work? And what happens when I'm not giving back in the economical prospects? I, as a human resource, all the factor inputs that brought in to make me has been vain. If I would just put it in a simpler terms, the nurturing given by my parents, the guidance given by my teachers, the all forms of monetary gains, scholarship that I've received, all that go in vain when I don't get back or when I don't give back to society in forms of monetary gains. And the same example that I would like to bring it out again, the simple remote, many factors of input were there for this. And what happens, I don't sell it. All these factors input will go in vain, will go in waste, and that's what's happening in society. So we are not entitled to be forced, we are not entitled to be tortured, we're not entitled to put up with atrocities given by the society. I've elaborated on a psychological video why women are enduring the atrocities by their husbands and fathers and why men are doing that. In this video, kindly click on that and that will give you much insights on that. I don't want to duplicate those informations over here and repeat myself again. Kindly watch that video and that will give you much clarity regarding the same. So let's hope in the near future at least that we all would be considered to be humans equally and not just an instrument to vent our frustrations, to vent our anger, to use as a pawn, to use as an instrument and to be utilized as a utility at least, because we are all humans and we all deserve at least the bare minimum dignity that we all are entitled to. Thank you so much for that.